was a 21-year-old varsity scholarship tennis player apprenticing under Dick King, a USPTA certified professional, during the summer of 1969. I was gaining my first real tennis teaching experience at Caswell Tennis Center in Austin, Texas. Early on, one of the ladies from a group that I was teaching in the mornings when it was cooler came to me and indicated she would like to take private lessons. She wanted to know the cost, which I think my rate was $7 an hour for a private lesson. That same lesson today, according to Google, is in the range of $60 to $100 per hour. Talk about inflation. Now, granted, I was a college assistant instructor, and I think Dick King, the director of tennis at Caswell, was around $15 per hour in those days. So moving on, this lady was an absolute delight with a wonderful sense of humor. We hit it off to the T, as the saying goes. I didn't know what it specifically meant either, so I Googled it. Here's Google's answer. It is a shortened version of to a tittle. The word tittle refers to those tiny little additions you have to make when writing letters. Her first 2 private lessons went well, and the next thing I know, she wants me to teach her daughter, Tammy. I initially envisioned Tammy was an 11 or 12-year-old or even younger, based on my thinking. My adult student, Carolyn, was no older than 35. To me, she appeared younger than 35, maybe even younger. So how surprised was I when a young lady of 16 shows up who could easily pass for 21 or older. Not only that, Tammy was way too mature for her 16 years. This made me intrigued but leery, knowing how unpredictable young girls could be. I had had a steady and serious relationship in high school with a girl 2 years younger than me, but we had broken it off when I went off to college. She later became my first wife, Vicky. Long story short, I did not date very much during the first 3 years I was in college. I was getting a longing for female companionship. I immediately think of that song, and Along Comes Mary, by the Association in 1966. Well, along came Tammy. So before long, I'm sneaking over to her house after 11 o'clock at night so we can go joyriding on my roommate's John's Honda 250 dirt bike motorcycle. We truly were enjoying each other's company since she had inherited the same sense of humor that her mother possessed. No drug could ever get me higher than the way I felt with Tammy at midnight in Austin, cruising around with a beautiful babe like her, wrapping her arms around me like her life depended upon it, which it probably did, I hate to say. My inhibitions were melting away like an ice cube on the streets of Austin in July, which it was. Up to this point, I had not crossed over that line that result in a statutory rape charge. However, we were moving too fast in that direction, and logical me was about to have a fit. In my head was a very sensible voice telling me not to be a complete idiot and end up in prison or being whacked by an irate father. Tammy had no voice inside her head, for she was ready to tango, if you catch my drift. I listened to that voice until the day of the moon landing. Once again, to jog my memory, I had to ask Google, and the facts fit my recollections. It was a Sunday, and Tammy and I had a secret date to travel into the desert southwest of Austin to a delightful swimming hole fed by a cool stream with a wonderful small waterfall into the swimming hole. A very popular spot, particularly for couples to spend a Sunday afternoon, enjoying the warm water of the pool and the cooler water of the waterfall. Absolutely delicious. Just by itself, this little day trip with Tammy goes down as the most delightful day I'd ever spent on this earth up to that point in my life. I believe it was Billy Crystal's character Fernando on Saturday Night Live that forever ingrained the word marvelous in our lexicon. I believe his catchline was, "You look marvelous, my dear." Well, I was feeling quite marvelous as my carnal desires were overtaking my logical brain. We cannot have a good juicy tale without some good old-fashioned deceit, can we? The day before the moon landing, Tammy flat out lied to her parents when she wanted me to take her swimming at our gorgeous swimming hole in Cool Stream Waterfall, 15 or so miles southwest of Austin. She told them she was going to a friend's house to study for a big test on Monday, for one of her limited summer school makeup courses. She had a friend that would cover for her. I was beginning to see that Tammy would do whatever is necessary to get her way. At 14, I learned later, she had started to get sideways with her stepfather, my student Carolyn's second husband. So I never met Tammy's real father, and to be honest, this made things easier on me. I don't think I need to go into details. Up to 14 again, I learned this later. Tammy had done very well in school, but as her resentment grew for her stepdad, this dramatically affected her educational performance. Again, as I found out later, Tammy had told her mother everything about her involvement with me. Lots of details were told about what we had done, almost to the degree that Carolyn was living out her fantasies through her daughter. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but my desires were rapidly silencing them. That brings us to that fateful moon landing Sunday. Up to this point, it had been heavy petting at the least, or worst, depending upon whose perspective was taken. My reservations had been put aside. It was time for some fun and excitement. After a day in the sun and a considerable amount of real swimming and frolicking with others, we were famished. As best I remember, we headed to our favorite Waffle House to soak up some calories. When you had done as much late-night motorcycle cruising as Tammy and I had, you absolutely knew where the best Waffle Houses were located. My roommate John was out of town with my vehicle, and we ended up back at the apartment about an hour before Tammy was due home at 9 p.m. that Sunday evening. Tammy couldn't care less about the moon landing that had taken place earlier that day at 3:17 p.m. Central Time, or Neil Armstrong's first step on the moon to take place at 9:56 p.m. In my mind, it was perfect timing. Fun and exercise, Waffle House, then back to the old apartment to make out and see where things were going to go. Reminds me of another great song, Anticipation by Carly Simon. Well, we came awfully close to doing the nasty and unfortunate saying for making love. My logical side finally took over and said, no. Tammy was not a happy camper when I simply had to tell her the truth. The risk for me was too great. After that mild rejection, I knew she truly no longer believed I was the wild and crazy guy that she wanted to spend the summer with and lose her virginity to. I was thinking long-term relationship. She just wanted a fling. I came to my senses, finally realizing Tammy was a little messed up and was in no way as mentally mature as I had first thought. It was time to ease out of this situation. Tammy sealed the deal. She made up a story about me and told it to her mother. This put me in a negative light with Carolyn. I think Carolyn knew Tammy's moods well enough that she did not overreact and try bring me down in any way. However, she did stop taking private lessons. That was when I knew everything was different from that point on. This was one of life's good, solid lessons that I had learned without too much drama and negative consequences. I had dodged a bullet. It was then that I made a vow to never get involved with any of my tennis pupils, especially if they were younger than 18 years old. I have lived up to that vow and avoided a lot hardship and misery experienced by other coaches in practically every sport. Tennis and golf pros get singled out for more ridicule, though. Once I left Austin to start my senior year at IU, I never heard from either one of them again. I just have this memory of a little more than a month that I was on cloud nine, as the saying goes. Tammy reminded me of Anne Margaret in Bye Bye Birdie. She was a real dish. I hope her life turned out well for her and her mother, too. I had finished out the summer thoroughly infected with the joy of teaching the game of tennis. That joy, that long-lasting passion, ultimately took over my life. Once I had fulfilled my commitment to the U.S. Air Force, and they had finished sending me all over our planet for 5 years. I was free to become a true professional tennis coach.